Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with the introduction for the actual MIT Enterprise Forum. We're actually a non-for-profit volunteer organization that was formed out of Cambridge. Originally, it was a think group where entrepreneurs came together to talk about their business plans and strategically plan out their business growth. And over the years, we've expanded our chapter or the Enterprise Forum into different cities around the world. And ours is for South Florida. We've been located here in the South Florida community since 1985. And we've gone through different iterations over the years, just like the technology and business has evolved over many years. And the main reason for these enterprise forums is to create these educational events, these placeholders for people in the professional industries to come together, have conversations, share ideas, and help each other out in different aspects of the building businesses, building communities, and improving the lives of everyday people that we service. And this particular forum is on the importance of diversity and inclusion, and not just in the workforce when hiring people, but also in the leadership teams and building the businesses, building the different departments aligned in businesses, and then as well as the product development. As you grow your company, build the teams, and create a product or service that services the general public, how can you include diversity and inclusion to improve the different aspects of your business? And with the whole COVID-19 pandemic happening right now, like I mentioned before, the rise of remote work, we wanted to add this conversation to the topic of diversity and inclusion, because with the tools to telecommute over long distances and transcend different barriers, and not just physical barriers, but diversity barriers, and including people from different walks of life and different parts of the world that you may have never been able to interact with or have a collaborative partnership with. So these type of technology tools enable us to have the ease of communication and collaboration between people. And so we wanted to open the conversation up to including those topics as well too, and how are companies leveraging these technology tools in these times, and not just in a global crisis, but also to help in personal crisis. So when your employees, either on the workforce and the leadership team, do face adversity, how do you leverage these tools to help them overcome the struggles and overcome the obstacles that they face in their lives? So I wanted to go ahead and start introducing our panelists. The first panelist that we have, I'll go ahead and stop sharing this so we have a full screen of our panelists. And so our first panelist is Stephanie. She is the Chief Program Officer and the Chief Information Officer for the Children's Trust. Hi, Stephanie, welcome. And we'll let everyone to give their introductions afterwards as well. David, he's a Senior Vice President for Best Buddies. He focuses on the state of development operations for Best Buddies International and has been there since 1996. Mo Hollis, he is the co-founder of Paparazzo, and he is a HR, which Paparazzo is a HR service for startups and focuses on outsourcing the HR's operations. And then Pedro, he is from WeWorks Labs. He is the manager and helps startups and innovations grow their businesses in the South Florida community and help them through the different stages of the business growth. So first and foremost, welcome. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us, and looking forward to a great conversation. So with that, Pedro, if you would like to take it over, and go ahead.
Hey guys, welcome. Thank you for coming. Our busy schedule of sitting at home and trying new recipes and things like that, but no, it's a pleasure and an honor to be moderating. I'd like to give everybody a chance to go through and do their intros. I think it'd be great if they did that before we started the chat. So Stephanie, if you want to kick it off, just a 30 seconds on your background and who you are.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to everybody. My name is Stephanie Sylvester. I'm the Chief Programs Officer and Chief Information Officer at the Children's Trust. The Children's Trust is a local taxing authority that takes $500,000 of your property tax and pulls it together to fund programs that help improve the lives of children and families in Miami-Dade. This year, our budget is $184 million. I'm responsible for the implementation of the programs that we fund with that money, and I'm also responsible for the IT solution that drives the Children's Trust. Prior to the Children's Trust, I spent my career in corporate IT doing IT quality.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. David, go ahead and jump in.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is David Quillen, and I am the Senior Vice President for Global Mission, State Development, and Operations for Best Buddies International. And we are a global volunteer movement that's changing the world for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities through friendships, through jobs, through leadership, and inclusive living. And I'm a proud resident of South Florida and super excited to be here. So thanks, everyone.
Go ahead, Mo.
Hello, hello everyone. Mohalis Days. I am co-founder of Pop Browser, where I also serve as the COO and co-chief people officer. We are a startup in people operations, people analytics, and HR, primarily a consulting firm for startups, and recently started expanding startups and small businesses, but recently started expanding outside of South Florida and serving large private corporations as well.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. So as you know, we're here to talk about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Just a quick 30 seconds. I want to say that when we think about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, it's important that we change the conversation about why. I think it's important to mention that we're not striving for diversity because we want to, quote unquote, help minority groups, but it is about making organizations stronger and smarter. According to the World Economic Forum, the business case for diversity in the workplace is overwhelming. There's a Boston Consulting Group study that says companies with more diverse management teams have 19% higher revenues due to innovation. So it's not just about helping groups that need help. I think that's such a poor way to put it. There really are benefits that are proven for bringing diversity into organizations. There's lots of studies, and I think we're going to kind of go beyond the why, and we're going to get into the weeds a little bit and talk strategy and implementation. We're going to talk about what does a diverse and inclusive environment look like from the perspective of the person who doesn't look like everybody else. And if it's okay, Stephanie, I want to start with you. I want to kind of talk about the fact that when we talk about diversity, most people focus on physical diversity, but that's not always the total picture. And I want to address the diversity of thought. Why is it important to bring people from different backgrounds and with different lived experiences, and how can they help your organization?
So I believe that diversity of thought is key because it helps you look at problems differently. If we all have the same training, the same background, the same similar work experience, we'll approach problems in a similar manner. But if you have a different background, a different perspective, you look at things differently. An example is that my background was corporate IT before I jumped into running the program portfolio at the Children's Trust. And somebody would say, why does somebody with an IT background have capacity to run programs? And because I come from a different perspective and I don't have a social services background, I actually approach problems differently. I ask different questions. And so we've been able to really change the narrative about how we interact with our funded agencies. We've also been able to really look at having greater impact and just really increasing our return on investment. And so I think that diversity of thought is definitely key, even though I have physical traits that look like a bunch of other people when we all sit around the table, because I have a different background, a different worldview. I actually bring a richer diversity, and not just me. I'm using myself as an example, but I've been in a number of cases where, because of somebody else's background or worldview, they find a solution. I remember being on an IT project, and we had this guy that had just come over from Cuba, like maybe a year or so, and his life experience in Cuba was so different from everybody else that his approach to problem solving was pretty innovative, and we were able to solve a lot of problems that other people weren't able to solve, because he didn't have the world experience we did. So I think diversity of thought is very important when you're looking for building a creative team that can problem solve and is nimble.
I think that's really good. And you made a comment when we talked last week, just when we were talking about this topic, that you said you've seen leadership teams that are physically diverse, so they all kind of represent the different people groups, but then when you start speaking to them, you realize kind of that they're all coming from a very similar background. Maybe they all went to very similar schools. And so even though they had that physical diversity, they didn't have the diversity of thought. But it does open up another question, how do we ensure that the diversity of thought ideal doesn't become an argument against physical diversity?
Well, so I think you're right. There's definitely a very tight rope that's being walked there. And you want to make sure that you're not inadvertently marginalizing people because it's not the right cultural fit, or because you have too many people that think that way. And I think that if you start with diversity of thought, and then you just kind of like just take a couple of steps backwards, why is my experience different from Mo? Well, one, I'm a woman and Mo is a man. Why is my experience different from David? I grew up in Belize, David grew up in the US. So you have physical diversity, physical differences that kind of like play into your thought process. And I think that when you overlay that with your work experience, your educational experience, then you get a holistic view, and that's the only way you really get full diversity. So when I say diversity of thought, it's not at the expense of not including the physical diversity. I'm just saying that we need to be careful that we're not just focusing on the physical diversity and stopping there. That's not where you need to stop. You need to stop at the diversity of thought, because together those two sets of diversity brings a richer experience than say where you're just focusing on physical attributes. That's just my experience. I've seen where I've been on really diverse teams that come from different countries, have different sexual orientation, different genders, and the things that we're able to produce. And really, the really key thing about that is you need less of us. When there's a very diverse group of people, you need less team members. I remember being on a team. There were 17 of us, and we were pretty diverse. I mean, some of us were diverse in physical traits. I mean, definitely diverse in terms of thought process and how we went about approaching our problem solving. And we were able to build out an amazing IT solution. And every other place that's built out something similar, smallest team size is about 50, 60 people. So,
wow.
So if you ever want to know like why diversity makes sense, that's another angle to think about.
Awesome. That's awesome. So we hear about diversity and we hear about inclusion, but I do think we can take it just a little bit deeper. And I want to talk about something that Mo is really passionate about, and it's belonging. So Mo, this question is directed to you. How do you define belonging, and what role does that play in these types of discussions? And how is that different from diversity and inclusion?
Absolutely. Okay, so when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and we trying to see, uh, people may question, okay, you're adding another letter, right? You're adding another category. What's wrong with diversity and inclusion? And we haven't even reached most companies haven't even reached their diversity and inclusion threshold or goals, and yet we're adding something else. But it's all important. And if you really are trying to grow that ideal team, you need to include it. So to break it down, diversity is very metrics oriented. It's something that a lot of times people are checking boxes, right? When they say a percentage of my workforce or leadership is this, that, or the other, whether that's gender, whether that's ethnicity, background, and if you go deeper, of course, where they went to school, certain education levels. That's diversity. Or can I look at a group or look at some of the numbers and see what's there and what's not? Inclusion goes a little deeper in terms of, okay, we have the numbers, we have these people, but are they included in important decisions? Are they taken seriously in the meetings? Are we moving them up through the ranks? Where are we with the retention of the people that are diverse? Now, Verna Myers, somebody everybody should look up if you're interested in this topic, and I'm assuming everybody who's here is interested in this topic. She has a nice quote to separate those two. Diversity is being asked to come to the party, while inclusion is being asked to dance, right? So am I being active or asked to be active? Now, belonging. Belonging is belonging. The way I would say is, are you permitted? Do you feel permitted to be your authentic self? Can you come in there and important word is, do I have to code switch? Do I have to act or be something that I'm not to kind of stay? Do I look next to me and the people who are being promoted are doing certain things that is against who I am or my background, and I have to dedicate a part of my energy and my focus just to make sure that I could get ahead, right? So belonging will say, okay, I'm a diverse hire. I'm here. Inclusion, yes, they ask me to the meetings, but a lot of times after that meeting, do I go straight to my cube because I can't connect to anybody? Do I see anybody else like me is actually making it through the company? Do I feel comfortable in my own skin? And a lot of what belonging comes in stories, right? That's the best way I always explain it. And a simple one, I have many, but I'll give a simple one, is I had an interview with somebody that wanted to join our company. And one of the final questions I said, do you have any more questions? One of the first ones she asked was, I like to wear my hair purple. Is that okay? I'm like, why wouldn't it be? What as if that makes you feel more comfortable and you're in the office and hey, wear it green, purple, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I want you to come in and not have to worry about how different do I have to be just to come to work from what I would be in my normal day-to-day life.
That's awesome. I actually love that. So now that we've all switched to this virtual mode, it's a new world for a lot of us. But I do, so we don't have like a way to poll the audience, but I do want to encourage you guys, ask questions. Feel free to use the Q&A functionality. I don't know if there's a functionality to raise hand. I think so, maybe. If there is, and you want to raise your hand, we can take a look at that and we can see. So I would encourage everybody that's here to feel free to ask questions or put them in the Q&A, and we can always take a look at them at the end as well. So you're not interrupting by putting in a question. All that interaction is really great, and we love to see it. So I'm going to switch to, we've I think when we look at diversity and inclusion, everybody kind of has their default kind of like bias on what that means and who we're talking about. And a lot of times that, people's default is people of color and sexual and gender minorities. But what about other groups? And so I think it's great that we have David here. how can organizations create a strategy around hiring people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as you mentioned?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for that question, Pedro. And, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are by far the most maligned and disenfranchised group of people in the world. And in my travels around speaking to different thought leaders and HR individuals, they frequently have strategies for, ethnicities and, veterans and a whole, slew of different demographics. But when I ask them about their strategy around intellectual and developmental disabilities, very often they don't have a strategy around that group of people. And in my work, I'm able to, see so many amazing individuals that have a wealth of experiences. They have so many different abilities and talents of where they could be contributing to different companies and different cultures. And I just think it's really important to be able to think about, that specific group of people and how they might be able to benefit your company's culture and be able to support your bottom line. And I couldn't agree with you more, Pedro, just about when you think about, the business benefits of having a diverse workforce and employing people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I have a story about this individual that was working at a park in New York City at Central Park Conservatory, and his main duties are to, welcome people to the park and give them specific directions. But then his primary responsibilities on their way out is to ask the individuals if they would consider a donation to support the Central Park Conservatory. And in the first 6 months, their donations increased by 119%, and in 1 year by 145%. He's been able to maintain that level of performance over the last 4 years. And it's just a great business case for really capitalizing on the talents that people have, and also asking for support. If you need help to build a strategy, there's organizations like Best Buddies, and there's plenty of other, support providers out there that want to help get this group of people to work. It's 81% unemployment rate for this group of people with intellectual disabilities, which probably today is even more because so many companies, are furloughing or dismissing people for now. So I can't even imagine what those numbers will look like. But I know in my heart and in the experience I've had that there is a benefit to having this group of people working in companies and industries around the world.
So once the awareness exists, and hopefully this message goes viral and everybody starts considering these strategies. Once the awareness exists around hiring people with disabilities, how do we break down the biases that employers have, which say like this group can only perform limited or unimportant tasks?
I think you have to have a conversation about it. And I think you need to build a safe culture where people can, feel safe in asking questions. Not, just because you have autism doesn't mean you're exactly the same as every single person with autism, or, the same. There's a whole array of a number of different intellectual and developmental disabilities, and everybody brings something different to the table. But being able to have a conversation where people can ask those questions and identify what their biases might be, or identify what their fears are, and building some goals and some expectations around what that looks like. And I also find it so powerful when I'm able to bring participants into a room like a lunch and learn, where we're having that conversation where they can interact with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and see that they have the same hopes and the same dreams and the same goals as all of us. And they want that feeling of belonging, and they want to contribute and be part of an amazing culture. So I think I'm really big advocate of just having honest conversations and being able to educate people about the incredible abilities that these individuals can contribute when given a chance and having the right supports in place.
I love that. So this is an open question. I think we've got time for everybody to answer it if you've got a response. But we're going to go beyond the management biases. Once a company embraces diversity and inclusion, how can they ensure that like the individual team members are also on board and educated? For example, something as simple as using the wrong pronoun can be very harmful to someone who's already dealing with gender dysphoria. But many employees are not educated for these situations. They joke about it. They don't know how to handle it. They don't understand. So how can organizations create a work environment that's safe, that's welcoming, that's inclusive? And specifically, I'd like to hear, any stories of what you've seen work in other organizations. And anybody, I'd love to hear from all three of you, whoever wants to jump in first.
So, so this my present company and my previous company, we've had somebody with a disability, and I will say that the way we've gone about it in both places is there was an announcement at all staff that this person was going to join the organization, and and then what was the expectations of interacting with this person. And when the person joined, there was a point person that we were supposed to go to if we wanted the new employee to do something for us. That was very helpful. I know Best Buddies and the organization that we use, the Moya Foundation, have job coaches, which really helps ease the transition. But I think the bigger piece about it is that when you hire somebody that's diverse and different from the organization, and you have one or two people that are their champion, it makes them comfortable with being themselves, and then they change the culture. So with the example at both my present company and previous company, these young men really created an undercurrent of lightness and just just good feeling. They come into the room and you might be having a tense conversation, and they come into the room and they will just smile with you and say hello, and you can't be tense anymore. I think that's key, and that's an example from the disability standpoint. But I've also been in places where we have identity groups where there might be a woman group, and so you join the woman group and you feel more comfortable because it's just a group with women, or you have an LGBTQ group and you're feeling comfortable because there's a group of people in the organization that you're a little bit more comfortable with, that you can talk and you can share, and then they help you navigate the culture and create a safe space.
Make it a core value. So from the very beginning, with what Pop Browser does and what we do with a lot of our clients is, if you're serious about diversity and inclusion and belonging, then it should come from the top, but at the same time from the front door. So we make sure that we talk about it during the interview process, and especially we put it as part of our orientation and onboarding process. One of our core values, for instance, is hybrid thinking. So talking about one of the passions that Stephanie was answering to, we put that as one of our core values. So when it comes time to onboarding and orientation, we get to talk about that in length, and is always included in our handbook, is included in the orientation presentation. So it's not something you could simply ignore, and we have a conversation right then and there. What do you think about this? Have you experienced? Tell me a story about if you have ever experienced being excluded, or if you have seen certain initiatives at other companies that have worked, because that's very important for us. So from the very beginning, front of the door and from the top down is what I would say. Make it a core value, make it something that's often talked about and not just disregarded.
Well, Mahalis, on that point, we have an actual question from the audience. They're saying most of the time when diversity and inclusion is spoke about is usually on the enterprise level and companies that have lots of resources. What would you say to startups or early smaller companies that are starting from day one? What can they do when they want to build an inclusive business from day one, when their resources are very limited, the workforce, the time, the network reach, funds, advisors, they don't have the resources that enterprise companies level to do. So what would you say to them?
Sure. That's something we actually specialize in, and I think Pedro has something to say about this too. so if you look at my startup, so we like to experiment and look at ourselves as well when we're building our services and we're working with other companies. We're a startup. We understand that everyone has biases, whether they're hidden or known. So we look at ourselves as well to see if we could examine what biases we may have and make sure that we're keeping track from the very beginning. When we started the company, is my co-founder, his name is Cody. So already you see he's a male. He's also identifies as black. So you have two black males leading a company. So if you just put it that way, like, okay, the founders, we're both millennials, so that's another thing. Both from Florida, that's another thing. Both went to the same college, that's another thing. Both of us went to the same fraternity, that's another thing. So we look at these things and make sure that, okay, how are we hiring? Are we making sure job descriptions are excluding people or not excluding certain people? There's certain software, for instance, that you could look out for that make sure that you're not using exclusive words in your job description or in your title. We A/B test that. We would put one job description with same job descriptions with different titles or certain different ways, and see if which one is getting a more diverse candidate population, and then we'll lead with one of them. So we experiment that way. Other things you could do if you have limited resources is really not that hard to expand your network. You have LinkedIn. Start reaching out to people. If you make that, the person who's asking that question is a great question, because that lets me know you already have that, you're oriented towards that. You have that goal in mind. So once you have that goal in mind, you could reach out to a lot of diversity inclusion people on LinkedIn. I do that all the time. I reach out to people. Cody himself, my co-founder, he's a chair of diversity inclusion for GM Sherm. So I'll ask certain questions. Hey, look, we want to do this, or I have a question about this. How can I do that? Be thoughtful of the groups you join. We are thoughtful of joining, for instance, the Gay and Lesbian Chambers of Commerce. We're very thoughtful of joining diverse groups and making sure we go to different groups representing women, different groups representing people of color, different groups representing people of different disabilities. We've had that conversation when we're building our software. From the very beginning, we want to make sure it's accessible to people with different abilities or disabilities, right? So you could start very early on if you're building software and you're hiring somebody to do UX design. Ask those questions, do research and see what other companies are doing, and start building that up from the beginning. And later on, once you have the resources that you need, you're not starting from behind. You already know what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I work with startups all the time. I think the biggest thing is just being aware of it, because I think people are generally, subconsciously drawn to people that look like themselves a lot of times. If you're not aware of it and you're not conscious of it, you'll build that group around you, and really you're building that group to the detriment of your company, especially as a startup. In the question, it says specifically like a limited network reach and a limited advisors. When you bring in people with different lived experiences, you open up different networks. If you have somebody that went, like you said, not that there's anything wrong, Mo, but if you have a partner that's went to your same school, a lot of times your network is going to overlap pretty highly. Where if you bring in people with different experiences, they're going to have a whole different network and a whole different set of advisors, and that adds a level of richness to what you're building. And as a startup, you need every little boost you can get. So I think being aware of it, and maybe sometimes it requires stepping out of your comfort zone, depending on where you are, to kind of avoid the inner drive to be comfortable because these people look like you, or they look like everybody you grew up with. So I think as a startup, it is a little bit easier sometimes, as Mo said, because you're not fighting with a large organization that requires this sort of re-education a lot of times. But at the same time, it's not like it's not like you have the funds to create these initiatives where you're specifically recruiting. So at that level, it's really just awareness and sort of being willing to go out of your comfort zone on that one. Anybody else?
Now, I would just say, don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think that's, there's a lot of amazing resources, like you mentioned, for people to, you know, reach out to their connections and just ask for their advice. I think, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about things, and it's amazing when you take a moment to step back and you reach out and ask people for their thoughts and their advice. You know, people love to give that. I mean, they love to connect in that way. Everybody, I think, comes to the table with the intention of wanting to help other people and be able to help, you know, mentor or share from their experiences. So just step back and really listen and reach out to people and ask. I think that's a huge win in that regard.
And Stephanie, I don't know if you want to jump in on the mentorship side of it, because that's, I know, an area you're passionate about.
Yeah, I agree. So I think about this from a perspective of, if you had a garden, you would not plant all the same plants in it. You're not going to have a garden with, even if you have a rose garden, all of the roses are not going to be the exact same color. I think that when you're a startup, one of the biggest things about that is that because you have limited resources, and as like my example I had beginning, where there was only 17 of us doing the work and capacity of what 50, 60 people would do, because we were so diverse and we were so nimble, is that you want to go from a perspective of, I'm small, I need to hire somebody that can do 5 things, and in order for them to do 5 things, they have to have a vast array of experiences, and that means that I have to that in of itself creates the foundation for diversity. So because no 2 people have the exact same life experiences. So if you're looking for somebody that has a vast life experience, then you're creating diversity. And as a startup, that's really what you want. You want to get as much talent with the least number of people, least amount of cost, because that's probably your biggest price point when you're just starting out. So I think that rather than making a case for, I need to be huge in order, a large corporation in order to be diverse, actually it's the opposite. The larger you get and the more branding you have, it's less important for you to be diverse, because you have other things to be able to sell your product. But if you're small, you need to have that team of diverse people that can like accelerate. So for example, like if somebody, like one of the reasons why I have my job is that I had the ability to manage. I understood the social services space, and I have a technology background. I'm a diverse hire. Every which way you look at it, I could check off 4 boxes every time I walk into the room. I'm a diverse hire, but because I have all of this diverse background, I bring a worldview that you wouldn't be able to do. I mean, if I was to leave my job, you would need at least 2, maybe 3 people to do what one person is doing. So I think that thinking about it that way makes the case for why diversity at a startup is more important than ever.
Yeah, I agree. I thought we lost David, but it looks like he's back.
Sorry.
That's okay. Perfect. I want to dig into, so we talked about like an enterprise, you know, large company, and we talked about the ability, for example, within WeWork, we have the women of WeWork, we have all different groups for everybody. And I think that really helps with the belonging side of things, because no matter where you come from, it's a big organization, you're going to find people that you can connect with, right, in those groups. But and then we talked about startups where the team is so small that you kind of have to be, you know, you feel included because you're part of that small team. But I think there's a middle ground where you've got like large organizations that, you know, using like, let's say franchises or things like that, where maybe you work at a Starbucks or you work at, and Starbucks is a great organization, so I don't know, but, you know, different organizations where, you know, how does, even if it's coming from the top down, what are effective strategies for communicating those values, Mo, like you said, you know, make it a core value, just tactically, how do you communicate those core values down to, you know, to that individual remote level where it might be a team of 8 working, and the organization might be several thousand people, but within that team of 8, you know, how do you educate that team? And especially now, this kind of relates to this world of virtual and remote. And if there's, you know, if there's any remote, you know, learnings or things like that that you guys have seen implemented, but whether it's remote or not, how do you convey that message and that core value down to small teams?
What questions are you asking your people? I think that is where you start. So before you message, know what questions you need to ask. A way of seeing if somebody feels included and belonging is uh, literally you could just ask, do you feel like you belong? Do you feel that your needs here are being taken care of? Do you feel that your individual self is valued? The more you know about your team as well and their different dynamics, the better you could make changes and have certain, you could take certain actions to make sure that they are included and they do feel like they belong. So outside of messaging, messaging is cheap as far as I'm concerned. So when I say messaging, I think I should better say signal it with actions. That's a stronger message. So you could say whatever you want. You could hire a PR firm. You could have somebody who write copy for you for your website. You could put it on some memo that you're sending out to your team, but people feel it. People understand it. So if you say, "Oh yeah, we care about women," okay, well, what's your family leave policy? What areas, if how long do I take out if I'm building a family? Is there spaces where I could go to, if whether it's breastfeed or whether any number of things? Is there any credits for daycare? If I whether I have whether I'm a single father, single mother, whether I have same-sex parent, or I'm a same-sex a relationship with kids. There's a number of things you need to know about your team and make sure that they feel like they belong. Ask them, what else can we do for you? What have you seen that we're not doing? And then take that and show that you're progressing towards it. Have that next message out be an action that you already fulfilled. We heard from you. We've been working on this for the last 30 days. Here's what we're doing. Look forward to this, that, or the other. So that's yeah, to summarize it, that's what I'll say. Is first start asking questions. Some of it should be anonymous, by the way. That's a key point and pivot, because some things certain people may not want to say out loud. And next, have the action and let the action drive the message.
So there's a really good question that's tied directly to what you're saying. How do we create a safe space for people to answer those questions? Because like you said, even in some scenarios when it's anonymous, the person typing the question is going to have this sense that they're going to know who I am anyway. So how do we, beyond just the anonymity, how do we create a safe space for people to answer those questions? Especially in like a small organization, as a follow-up, especially in a small organization, yeah, where it might be obvious by the size.
Yeah. So, and I want to make sure I don't monopolize this answer, because I know we have a lot of people with experience here. So we ask that question all the time because we're a startup and we work with startups. And it goes back to what I was saying prior, is make sure you're having some of those conversations up front. Make sure we say it during the interview process. We want you to be your authentic self. Ask your questions. Tell us really what you're looking for in your company. And we connect. We make sure that we are leveraging emotional intelligence to build that connection. And we try to share our own stories. A lot of times, to make people comfortable, share your own stories. I could tell stories about when I didn't feel like I belonged, when I messed up, when I thought when I thought I rise to the occasion but wasn't rewarded for it, or the positive stories. So once you have that and you have that connection with your people, they'll come up, right? They'll come in. And for everybody who's out there, it has to be a two-way street in communication, just like in a relationship. Sometimes you have to, if it's something that really is bothering you, that really is concerning, you have to take that step. So I'm proud when I see what happened with the #MeToo movement, when it started with a couple people stepping up and then a wave came in, right? So sometimes we need some of those people to say, look, I'm gonna take a stand, Yeah, maybe it might be embarrassing. Maybe it's something that I wasn't ready for. But we have to also have that conversation that saying, hey, look, we want you to be brave. We want you to share your stories. What are we not doing? And because sometimes, as a question asked, it's hard to have anonymity if there's 5 people, if there's 8 people, right? And we've had that. We've had, I don't want to put people out there, but we've had, as a small team, we've had about 10 people come in and out with 5 solid. And we've had very diverse teams. We've had people that share their stories of their arranged marriages. We've had people tell their story about, and we're very open to that. And we talked about different cultural aspects that everybody share. I did say a lot of the things that Cody and I have in common, but there's a lot of differences that we have in our background, and we openly share and talk about it, and we try to keep the mic open.
I love that. So, and a couple of things you said really stood out, like being able to share stories that illustrate people being brave and kind of heralding those as successes, I think is really valuable. Like you said, what you praise internally becomes the standard for what people expect. So quick, going back to something Stephanie said earlier, she mentioned, and this is based on a question from the audience. Thank you guys for the questions. You said, like, when you walk in a room, you're a diversity 4 ways already. And somebody said, you know, when you're a job seeker and maybe you're not born with many with what people consider diversity. You know, the question is, how do I become a diverse hire? Or, you know, or how do I make sure that people are kind of appreciating what I bring to the table?
No,
It's a tough question.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a very interesting question, right? So I think that I understand the history of why diversity and inclusion started with physical characteristics, women, gender, sexual orientation, color of your skin, race, um, and so forth. But I think that as much as we're still continuing to fight some of these same fights that we've been fighting for over 100 years, I think that it's very easy for people to look past whether your physical appearance if you are indeed a diverse person. So a diverse person means that you have diverse experiences. And so what is it that you do, right? So I have a colleague, and he plays every single sport there is. So he can talk to anybody about any sport. He is willing to try any music, any place. You say, hey, let's go to X place. He's all about it. He doesn't go, oh no, that's Latin, or oh no, that's Caribbean. Oh no, that's rock. No, like he is a very diverse person. And so, like, maybe when you first see him, you might say, oh no, he's not diverse. But the moment you start talking to him, he disarms you, because he's telling you about like what he just did, and then you're like, oh my God, this guy is an amazing addition to the team because he has a diverse experience. He's a diverse person. And I think that that's really, like, when we want to get to the heart of diversity is, are you a diverse person? Do you do the same thing every day, or do you do vast a range of things? I mean, and so when I say that I'm diverse because I can check 4 boxes, that's one thing. But I'm diverse because I do a whole host of things. I have a diverse job. Outside of my job, I do a whole bunch of other things that people are like, what? No way, you wouldn't do that. Like, and so, like, I'm always fascinated by when I tell people what I've been doing in my spare time or what trip I'm taking, and they kind of look at me like, wait, like, that's not aligned with the little box that I had put you on based on what you look like when you first showed up. And I think that that's the key thing about doing things to make yourself diverse, And then when you go into an interview, people will see your diversity and they'll move past your physical characteristics.
I love that. So a couple more questions. I'm going to start with the second one first. Again, anybody who wants to jump in. So startups are measured differently, and being a solo founder is not always as appealing as co-founders. So how do we assess who's the best, who can be a good co-founder for us? I'm happy to jump in here on this one, but I'd love to hear somebody's thoughts as well.
I'll jump in here. Co-founders. So again, another area we work on. I have co-founder interviews. So when we're looking at who could be a great co-founder, two of the best measures when it comes to successful co-founders is one, have you worked on any other projects together, any prior projects together? Do you know each other's work style? Do you know each other's communication style? Do you know what expectations you have with each other? The second one is having extended interviews. You could call them dates, you could call them coffee chat, but essentially is asking each other important questions. Have questions you would ask. If you go online, we do that with co-founders ourselves when they need that kind of help. But you can go online and you can look up questions to ask your co-founder. And some of it is, so going back to the hybrid thinking, you also want that. So some of that would be looking and analyzing, do we make up for each other's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities? What kind of gap can we fill? What role would each of us have? Do not talk about that 6 months in, right? Decide. You don't have to have titles, but you definitely should have areas of focus that each one will focus, will tackle. So yeah, again, it's how often, and I'll say one more thing. We've seen that co-founders sometimes have found each other virtually, which is absolutely fine. There's a lot of teams that are actually run virtually right now. GitLab, if anybody's interested in looking for some best-in-class companies, GitLab, Envision, Zenefits. GitLab is 1,600 people and they're all virtual. Venture-backed, raised millions of dollars. The C-suite has never been in one office at one time ever, I don't believe. So, but even that, you should have miniature projects before you sign on that final agreement to form it together. So even if you haven't worked in the past together, you could start doing it right now and say, okay, look, you look like a great person to work with. We complement each other. We have diversity of thoughts. We have diversity of experience. Let's work on a couple projects together, in the next 6 months to see if we really want to commit to this.
The other thing that I would add to that is truly knowing who you are as a person. So you don't want a co-founder that has all the same skills you do, because that's not going to be helpful. You want a co-founder that complements, that has different deficiencies. And so I while I have not started a company, I have been in a lot of leadership positions where I have to hire people to help me lead, which is similar to being a co-founder. And what I do is I look for people that complement my skill set. I'm not a detail-oriented person. I don't want to be bothered with the weeds. I hire people that love doing that. I am a little bit more casual about how I go about moving around. I hire people that are more formal and follow the rules and understand the importance of hierarchy and bureaucracy and how that keeps you out of trouble. And so you have to know who you are as a person, and then you find a co-founder that fills the gaps that you have, because then you make a strong team. And that's one thing. So you now have a stronger team. But secondly, you're less likely to go into other people's swim lanes. So one of the issues with co-founders are, if they're all alike and they have the same strengths, then everybody's in the same swim lane and that creates tension. But we don't have that. Like at our executive team at the company I work at right now, we all have our own sets of interests, we do not have the problem of anybody moving and enter anybody else's swim lane. And that is such a refreshing thing to be. And we gel really well together, and we have these great conversations. Everybody's bringing their point of view. And when it's time to distribute the work, everybody's picking up the piece of work that they like to do. And when you look, all the work's gone. It's been assigned. So I think it's about like understanding who you are as a person, and then finding somebody or people to complement those deficiencies you have.
Yeah, and I would add, I think finding a co-founder is very, very hard. It takes usually, I mean, unless you get really lucky, it takes a lot of concentrated effort to find that person. But what I would add again is don't take the temptation of staying in your comfort zone, and specifically ask, if it's a startup and you're starting it yourself, ask your advisors, ask anyone who's a potential investor, hey, who is a good co-founder that you know in your network? So try to reach beyond the people you know, and get recommendations. And that's how you kind of bring in people from backgrounds that don't match your own. Because if you stick specifically to people that you know, again, you're going to be picking from that same network pool, which is going to limit the amount of diversity that you have on your co-founding team. One more question, and I don't know who's best to take this, so I will open it up to the floor. What's the impact, maybe David, maybe you can give us some insight here. What's the impact of AI with special needs and the hiring and kind of how that works?
Sure. I mean, I think AI is impacting in so many different levels, but I really don't see, specifically how it would prevent, employing people with, special abilities to come onto your team. I think what's been amazing for me is to see, how many of our participants that I work with every day have such unique abilities from an AI perspective. I recently heard a story of one of our individuals that's on the autism spectrum that took a position with a financial company and was going through a number of their receivables and caught a huge error that ended up saving the company, $1 million. So, there's another individual that we brought on to work for a tech company, and his main job is going on LinkedIn looking for specific skill sets of individuals to then pass on to the HR recruiter to come in and help code. So there's, a lot of different skills. I even have another individual that I work with a lot in Chicago, and he's one day I was talking to him and he said, "Oh, David, I didn't know that you had, a 3-car garage." And I was like, "Wow, that's a job skill." He went on the internet, he looked at my house and he saw that I had a 3-car garage. And I immediately thought, that's research right there. That's someone who is looking and analyzing data and looking at information. Like, he is valuable to a company, because there's a lot of people and companies that would pay good money to have someone that goes in and gets that kind of thorough information on someone. So recognizing from an AI perspective what does currently exist and trying to apply to specific skill sets, and also what people want to do. I know at Best Buddies, I mean, we're really a big fan of talking to individuals about what it is they want their career to be, and helping them get the skills and build a career of how to get to their overall professional goals.
So just to add to what David said, is that, so if you look at it from a tech perspective and AI, people with disabilities are much better at consistent tasks. So they make better testers. They're much better at repeating the same thing exactly the same way without deviating. So they make great testers. They also are less afraid of technology and actually interact with technology better. There's a number of studies that show that people, especially people on the spectrum, using technology and helping them amplify who they are. And so if you turn it around, because they have these great skills, they actually are a great value add in terms of product definition and product validation. AI is, as much as we're thinking, oh my God, this is amazing and so forth, AI is still basically building a software solution. And there are certain components of that you have to follow in building a software solution that if you don't, it won't work. And people with disabilities, all kinds of disabilities, are actually great at helping you make sure that you build a very robust product. So I think the thing that I would encourage people that are listening to this as it relates to diversity, especially with technology and people with disabilities and so forth, which is the you go along and people are willing to include all of the different marginalized groups, and then you get to the disability and it becomes a harder sell, is that this is a group of people with untapped resources, and when they come to work for you, I promise you, they have a level of commitment that is just mind-blowing, and they will be there every single day. So I know I'm probably taking David's spin, but I think it's important for people to realize that if you get somebody with a disability on your team, they bring a worldview and a diversity, and they bring this loving kindness to your work environment. So any kind of conflict is less toxic because you're just because they're there, the energy that they emit. So for me, I think it's actually a really great place to be if you're considering somebody with disabilities to be part of your workforce.
And let me add my voice to this question and answer. So for me, and this is interesting because Pedro actually had a conversation with your WeWork's new executive chairman on this exact subject. Well, exact meaning more the perils and issues with AI. So Marcelo Clar had a conversation with him. Short. AI is ready and is way too early for that. It's seen as an answer rather than a tool that should be bringing up and unearthing new questions. And so one of the issues that we have with AI and the algorithms that and the way it's built is that the programmers behind the AI, they have to be diverse too. So the ones that are putting in the algorithm, putting in that data set, where is that data set coming from? So if you're doing, for instance, any kind of let's just say you're using AI for hiring or your people management, and you're looking at your current workforce and you're saying, okay, let me isolate the sample data of the most successful people in my company, but your company does not have a great DIB program and does not include people with disabilities, then you're going to that AI is constantly going to continue that cycle of excluding people with disabilities. And if you bring that conversation, sometimes people don't see it because they see, but it's AI. It's super smart. I'm pretty sure it accounted for that. Like, no, there's programmers, there's data sets that are being used behind that. So if you're feeding it the wrong data set, you're going to continue to get the wrong answers or bringing in the wrong questions. So you need to have checks in the AI. You need to have checks along your technology. You need to have checks in your user interface, and you need to test it with that diverse group, including people with disabilities or different abilities. Are they going to be able to engage with the technology the way that I had intended? And do I make sure that I have a sample population that will guarantee that?
Yeah, I love that. The data validation that's required to use AI is a pretty important aspect of it as well. And I don't know if there's any tools specifically that are geared towards enabling people with disabilities to do more roles, but I'll keep an eye on that as well. One more question: when applying for a job, should one identify or not if they have a disability? Is this a positive or a negative on the job application?
I encourage anyone with a disability to self-identify and disclose and be, authentic about that. I think that, when you do that and you're honest and upfront about it, and you can talk about, what supports that you may need in order to be, accomplish your specific goals and responsibilities. I know in terms of, through Best Buddies, as the job coaches that work directly with individuals, we're ready to help provide them with, any accommodations that they need to be successful in a job. And the reality is the majority of accommodations that I know, at least at Best Buddies, that we work with companies and participants to engage upon, they cost nothing. There's zero, and so really being able to, identify that you have a disability, I think is authentic to who you are. And when you talk about diversity, and there's so many companies that are challenged with wanting to create, these diverse workforces specifically for people with disabilities. So the more people who feel comfortable disclosing that, the better that we can be in, creating the diverse workforces that we all strive for.
Awesome. So, Robert, I know we're kind of hitting our time limit here. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, we could open it up to any other questions that the audience might have. If you do want to share a comment or actually just ask the question, we could unmute you and go ahead. You could share your thoughts on the conversation. So if anybody does have any questions, please raise your hand. And actually one more just came in. What is your opinion on the current state of the state laws that aims at achieving diversity in the workplace? Are they successful, or do they need to be modernized? So in terms of state laws and legislation, and versus us just building companies and including diversity within our workplace, where does the role of legislation come in when creating diversity?
I think that laws are important to push diversity, but go back to the beginning of the conversation where Mo talked about feeling belonging. So if you could have as many laws in place and people can follow it, but at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't make you feel like you belong there, you're not going to be able to get diversity. Isn't going to happen. And so one of the ways that I believe that we can get more diversity is to this concept that maybe, I don't know if anybody else uses it, I coined, called live-in advocacy. So if you know that you're a diverse person and you go to an organization, what you want to do is you want to live your advocacy. So you want to show up every day, make no mistake, don't hide who you are. Whenever I go for an interview, wherever I go, during the interview process, people know that I am an immigrant, I'm a woman, I'm Black, and I'm gay. And I don't apologize for it. I just weave it into my conversation, just like how a straight white male would weave his background into the conversation. He wouldn't apologize for it. When we're having conversations at the office and people are talking about their spouses, I talk about my girlfriend, just the same way. And that's really how you bring diversity about, because then people realize that whatever they were afraid of, whatever diversity group you're represented, that was creating such fear in them, they were like, wait a minute, you're a human being, you're fine. I remember being at a place, and I overheard somebody saying some disparaging things about gay people, and I'm sitting there and listening to this, and I'm not saying anything, and the person they're talking to is trying to get them to shut up because they know that person knows I'm gay, and I'm sitting there, and so when the person was finished saying what they had to say, I got up and I said, that's how you think of me? And the person says, no, of course not. I go, well, but I'm gay. we did not have any more problems with that person with any kind of anti-gay rhetoric. And I think that probably shifted the person's perspective about gay people. And I think that that's the key thing about, if we really want to push diversity, we have to live it. We have to be, it's like sometimes you're going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes you're going to like be like, no, I don't want to be here. But if you become comfortable with your discomfort, and you show up as if nothing, not apologizing, not explaining, not defending, then I think you push it forward.
Yes, I love that. It kind of ties into like what I've been thinking about, is just like you have to embrace your own diversity and be proud of your diversity and be comfortable with it and be able to share it in order to create the space so other people feel comfortable about their diversity and sharing it with you. And that's how you build the collaboration and build that symbiotic relationship that you could co-create with another person and help improve. So I wanted to ask everyone else, what is a main takeaway that you would like everybody to think about in their everyday life as they approach different situations, in terms of thinking more diverse in their day-to-day life and as they continue to build their business and hire new people?
I'll go. I think, for me, I would love the takeaway for people to recognize that, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities are incredible coworkers and people that you should be hiring, and taking that first step to, creating a strategy and reaching out to someone to help you. I think, this whole situation that we're in with COVID-19 and people practicing social distancing, this is the life that people with intellectual disabilities have lived for many, many years, being isolated from their communities, in their schools and in their workplaces. So the feelings that we all have in practicing this, recognizing that, understanding those feelings, I think will make us even that much more understanding for the future when our workplaces do return to whatever the new normal is. I heard someone say today that as we return to the workplaces, they're going to be diverse, they're going to be digital, and they're going to be dispersed. And so it's our role as an employee, as a team member, as a leader, to really do everything possible to make your value felt. And I love the quote from Maya Angelou that she says, just to paraphrase, people always forget those things you do, but they never forget the way you make them feel. And I think that speaks a lot to all these different advice and conversations that you've heard today from the panelists, is people don't forget how you make them feel. And we all have that human connection, that ability to, exit the phone, get rid of the phone, and just have honest conversations and foster opportunities for people to connect. And that's how we build diversity and inclusion in a work team.
I would say diversity and inclusion is very simple. It's very easy. It's just about what kind of mindset do you have, and I think that whenever anybody becomes afraid or uncomfortable with the concept of diversity, just think: would you have a garden with all of the same plants? And maybe there are a few people that will say yes, but most people will say absolutely not. And I think if you think that way, then that will help you get past your discomfort and be able to embrace or reach out to somebody that would bring more diversity into your life and into your workplace.
Excuse me. My final thoughts. I would say I would categorize it into three different sections that I want people to walk away with. First, we didn't talk about this a lot here, but analytics. Using the power of data and analytics and measuring to reach those goals and really see, do you have diversity, inclusion, and belonging? A lot of times, what you see is not exactly the experience of a lot of people. So make sure you're finding ways to measure that. Make sure you have that quantitative data to back your qualitative assessment or qualitative data as well. The second one is look for the unusual suspects. That's another one of my favorite topics when it comes to DIBS. The unusual suspects is there's when you look at headlines, there tend to be headlines of some of the larger issues that diversity, inclusion, and belonging is facing. They tend to be a type of people and type of different companies, but there's these micro areas that whether it might be 1% or 5% of the issues, but it's enough for that one person to leave your team. And I could speak from experience, a couple of stories. I'll tell you what I'm talking about. But for instance, in Miami, we are largely Caribbean and Spanish speaking area. So be careful with that because we look at it from a perspective of maybe oh, diversity means anything that's not white cis male. Not necessarily, right? I've been in multiple offices where I'm the only. I might be the only black person. I might be the only black male. And I've been in situations where I felt like I belonged. In one instance where I was in a large office, everybody in the office except for two of us were Spanish speaking and from a Spanish speaking country. But I felt like I belonged. So you can say I was a super minority. And then there was another intern who's white from Kansas. He was a super minority. There was no white person in that office, just like I was the only black person in that office. But I felt like I belonged, right? And then I had another one where, again, I was the only non-Spanish speaking person. I did not feel belonged. I could sit in a table and it'll go for 30 minutes and it was only Spanish speaking and I didn't understand a word. I did not feel like I belonged. And nobody looked at me twice. Another example is there's multiple cases where you could look at companies being founded by women. And again, I'm only using this because I want to focus on some of those micro things. And you think that would be the cure. Cody and I being black males is not a cure to diversity inclusion in our company, not by a long shot. Just like there's companies that are founded by women, and you could read the horror stories where they were actually they were acting negatively toward males and women, other women in their team. So you have to research this stuff and don't think you have a way out. We all have biases. Check yourself. And going back to one of my favorite terms Stephanie used, being self-aware. We all have them. Investigate yourself, investigate your environment. You have to be proactive. And that's my third one, being proactive. Reach outside of your network, teach yourself, know what your goals are. Make sure that there's a conversation you're constantly having with your team, with your mentors, with your advisors, with your co-founders.
Yeah, Mo, I love that you mentioned analytics, and that was exactly what I was going to talk about. Just obviously, like we kind of see things in passing, but just in kind of preparing for this talk, like a really quick couple of web searches led to lots and lots of research reports by very reputable organizations that talk about the benefits of diversity for organizations, whether it's startups, whether it's large enterprise. And I think our role and our responsibility is kind of helping to bubble up those stories. David, when we talked, you mentioned, I think I've heard like 3 case studies from you that I'd love to promote online. And I think, we are in a virtual world. We certainly have enough negativity bombarding us every day because that's what gets views a lot of times. But I think we have a responsibility, virtual world or not, to be promoting these reports. I'm a data person, so I love to see like when a research report was conducted and it was conducted properly, and this was the result, and it proves that having a diverse team, 19% increase in revenue is massive. That's huge. That's the difference between success and failure, and that was a Boston Consulting Group study. So I think anytime, if we don't see these stories in the news, let's find them and let's promote them, let's, as a takeaway. And as Mo was mentioning earlier, as an organization, promote that to your employees, whether it's a team of 10 or whether it's a team of 10,000. Show your values by what you're promoting and what you're celebrating. And I think that's how you help everybody. The reason we're talking about this is because there is still a very large percentage of the population within the US and of course globally that has overt opinions that doesn't allow and doesn't foster diversity and inclusion. And we have laws that help, but again, it might help with numbers, but it doesn't necessarily help with belonging. So it's our responsibility to continue that, that 100-year push that's been going on forever. I had a phone call about a year ago, so it wasn't a long time ago, and it was on speakerphone in my office. And if it wasn't, I don't think anybody would have believed that this happened. Having a very typical conversation about business and consulting, and the guy said, an older American gentleman said, you should change your name. And I thought he was joking. I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, Pedro, he's like, you're obviously very knowledgeable about business, and the name Pedro doesn't sound like you would know anything about business. And I was just like, everybody in the office looks at me, and I was like, I didn't even know what to say. I was like, kind of tongue in cheek. I'm like, well, we've come a long way now. So, I don't think I'll be changing my name, but it's just, this is still something that exists. And the more we can proactively kind of promote those stories and those research reports. And David, if you have some of those case studies, I would love to share those. But I think that's a takeaway that all of us have a responsibility to do.
Sorry to butt in because I know it was final words, but there's one story that I want to drop in there as well. And it goes back to that second heading I said about those micro moments or those edge cases. There was one small team I was in, and I was another only. This time I was the only single person. Everybody was married and had children. And it was an interesting position to be in. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but it would be one of those things. You come in the morning in the team, and everybody's talking about their weekend, and they of course share stories about what they did with their spouse or their family. Sometimes good stories, sometimes bad. But when it comes to me, and I talk about my single lifestyle, like, we don't want to hear about that. And by the way, it was nothing derogatory, nothing extreme, nothing bad. But it might be, okay, I went out, I stayed out till 10, might have gone on a date, and I had to pull somebody aside, and I said, look, I don't think that's fair that you could come in and you could talk about your family and what you did this weekend, but when it comes to mine, I have to talk about what I did alone or wasn't fun because apparently it makes you feel bad or something. And we had a conversation and completely changed that. But that's like one of those edge cases. I never thought about that until I was in that situation personally.
For sure. I would just mention, Pedro, since you were looking for case studies, that Best Buddies partnered with an organization called I4CP, which is the Institute for Corporate Productivity, that really looks at different human analytics for human resources all around the world. And they actually did a study on the Fortune 500 high-performing companies and what their strategies were around diversity and inclusion for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So you can download that report for free and get all of that data at bestbuddiesjobs.org. And it's amazing in terms of being able to see specifically the business benefits and how they highlight them specifically for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And there's a number of case studies that are included in that study. And we just relaunched and refreshed all the analytics around that just a couple months ago. So I encourage you to take a look at it. I'm going to send it to you anyway, even if you don't go to the site.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. So Robert, are we finished at 8 or 8:30?
No, we could wrap up at 8. Yeah, we could start wrapping up.
So
if there is any more questions from the audience.
Oh, we got a couple of questions.
It's more of a comment.
Got a couple of comments.
Yeah. From
Alice, once she was told in the city she's the only white bread one. Yeah, it's I agree. It can come as Mo said, especially in Miami. You could be in an environment where everybody speaks Spanish and you're the only one who doesn't, and that does also hurt that sense of belonging. And I think we need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Victor. Victor says, thank you for the thoughtful and wise feedback. Thanks, Victor. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, talking about inclusion and diversity, So I wanted to thank you guys all for participating. Thank you for the audience for taking the time to jump in, listen to the conversation, and also for your feedback and your questions about it. So just wanted to thank everybody, really appreciate the time. And if there's anything else, just please reach out and share.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Robert.
much, Robert.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great night, everyone. Great evening.
Yes, stay safe and healthy.
All right.
All right.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you a lot again for participating.